Welcome to Parkbench Tutors. For more information about Parkbench Tutors, you can find us at parkbenchtutors.com, or you can look us up on Facebook. In this podcast, we're going to introduce you to the idea of professional conduct and ethics and ask you to think about one or two situations. When you go into business, inevitably you will be asked to handle information, and some of that will be regarded as confidential information. So, what sort of information do you think should be confidential? If you're in accounting, you're going to be handling details about other customers. What sort of details do you think you have over other customers? What sort of financial information are you handling that might be confidential? You might want to jot a few ideas down here. You might also think about what information your employer holds about you. And do you think that should be kept confidential? You may well have thought about information about your bank accounts, your address, your age, your national insurance number, probably a host of other things as well. So, should everyone be allowed to see this information? What about other businesses? Why would other businesses be interested in collecting information, particularly financial information, about a business? Well, very often you find cases in the newspaper where you can read about one business trying to obtain information about another, and it's called industrial espionage, or as we would say, spying on another business. Well, why is this important? What might another business want? Well, details of processes, details of costs. Finance information can be quite valuable. Details of your marketing strategy, how much you're going to spend on a particular promotion. And increasingly, to obtain this information, hacking is used, hacking of computer systems. So think about the information others hold about your finances. Think particularly about credit cards. What happens if that data is hacked? What happens for your credit card? Who takes the responsibility for any misuse of the credit card? So, how do we keep information secure? Let's start at a very simple level in the office. We should make sure our filing cabinets are locked. We should make sure if we're working in an open office that we lock a desk. If we're working in an office on our own, then maybe we should just remember to lock the door when we leave. Many businesses will also restrict access, so you'll have particular keys which can only get you into certain areas or into certain filing cabinets. When documents are finished, there may well be a policy of shredding documents rather than just throwing them in the waste or recycling. If you use a computer, you may have to have a password, perhaps to sign on to that individual computer or to sign on to a network. And a business will often have policies so that you have to change your password every so often, and your password has to consist of particular things, uppercase, lowercase, and numbers, things like that. And of course, finally, for very sensitive information, businesses will often decide that you should encrypt it so that a key is needed to actually access the file. Here's a little scenario for you, and this is about confidentiality. Your work is considered confidential. You have a colleague and they often come over and talk to you. Now you know that your information on the screen is supposed to be confidential. So how might you respond to this? As you can see, the person in the picture has not responded very well. All the information that you have is in fact governed. In fact, it's decided that you can collect information as long as you conform to something called the Data Protection Act. So we're not going to go completely through the Data Protection Act, but let's think about some of the things that it says. It says that you have to obtain information lawfully and fairly, and it also says you can only use that information for the purpose stated. It must be accurate and it's got to be up to date, and you have a duty to protect the data. Here's a nice little scenario for you. If you're working on a spreadsheet for pricing, a manager asks you to go to their office immediately to discuss an issue. Suppose you're in an open office situation. So what possible action might you take before you went to see the manager? Well, you might want to close the program. You might even want to log off from the computer or put the screen to sleep. Or you might want to password protect the file and then close the file, because you might want to have done all of those, or several of those I should say. Here's another one. Your manager points out that your filing cabinet's full to overflowing. Now let's think about what action we should take according to what we find in the filing cabinet. Right, we find invoices received and paid from last year. Do we keep them? Shred them? Just chuck them in the bin? What do we do about them? And we find details of former customers, including credit limits. So, keep them, shred them, bin them. And then we find notes that we have taken over the years to help us write up the minutes from meetings of company directors. So again, it's the same sort of choices. Keep them, shred them, bin them. Now let's turn to ethical behaviour and think about what that means. Here are some ideas. It means maintaining confidentiality. It means working to our highest standards at all times, keeping up to date with procedures, following policies and procedures, and also being honest in our work and accepting responsibility. What about whistleblowing? This is also concerned with ethics. So what is whistleblowing? Well, whistleblowing is essentially when you work for an organisation and you see something that shouldn't be done being done in that work environment. What do you do? What action do you take? In some cases, whistleblowers need to be protected. So that, for example, if you see that the company that you work for is actually breaking the law, then you may decide that that needs reporting to the tax authorities, even perhaps to the police, and you may need protection for that. In which case the protection is very often that as the source of the information, your name and other details are kept from your employer. Here's some ethical decisions for you. I'm responsible for petty cash. One of my friends asks me if they can borrow £50. They tell me that they're going to pay me back tomorrow, and they suggest that I can lend them the money from the petty cash. What do you think that I should do? Think about it. Well, the answer, of course, was that I shouldn't lend them the money because the money doesn't belong to me. It's the firm's money or the business's money. Here's a request from a friend. You work as part of a costing team. You've been working on costs for a new product, and a friend who works for a company making a similar product invites you out for a drink, and during the evening your friend asks you how the new product is coming along. How do you react? What's the ethical thing to do in this situation? Well, you should not be discussing your employer's business, and so you should politely inform your friend that you don't want to talk about work and that you shouldn't be talking about the details of your work. What about this one for whistleblowing? You've started working in an accounts department. It's your very first day, and you notice one of your co-workers has brought in Christmas cards and is using the franking machine from the business to stamp the cards. Your co-worker tells you that they do this every Christmas for their friends, and he suggests that you can do the same thing for your friends. So what would you do? Think of the choices. You could, of course, just bring your Christmas cards and do exactly the same thing. You could tell your co-worker that they should desist, and that if they are seen doing it again, you would have to report it to a manager. Or you might want to report it to a manager anyway. What would you do? A very common one, this. A photocopier situation. You have a daughter at university. She is completing a project for her studies and asks if you can make 2 extra copies of the project using the photocopier at work. The project consists of 20 sheets to be copied. What do you do? Well, of course, you should not be copying anything at work without your employer's permission, and your employer may well have certain conditions to say that you can copy items for personal use. However, if they don't, then of course you are in breach of your contract if you do attempt to make copies. You are in effect stealing from your employer. Another common one. Your company's been trying to save costs and they set the thermostats on all of the office radiators. You arrive at work and you find it's freezing in the office, and so you decide to turn the radiators to a much higher setting. An ethical decision? Think about it. Should you just turn up all the radiators? Or should you ask for them to be turned up? Would you ring maintenance and tell them to turn them up anyway? Which one would you do? Or maybe you'd do something entirely different. That brings us to the end of this short session, brought to you by Parkbench Tutors and narrated by David Hopcroft. For more information about Parkbench Tutors, look us up at parkbenchtutors.com or find us on Facebook. Thank you for watching and listening. We wish you success in your studies.